Welcome to EcoFactors, a podcast from the Atlantic Wildlife Institute on Canada's East Coast. We sit down with people doing the real work and the communities pushing back against development that doesn't make sense for us or those we share the environment with. We are united with our guests from everywhere in honest conversations about what it actually takes to protect the earth that we call home. Moe Qureshi, thank you so much for joining us today on EcoFactors. This is our first episode, and so welcome to the honorary position of our first interviewee.
Thank you, Lisa. Happy to be here.
I had kind of titled this particular episode, What the Real New Brunswick Energy Transition Looks Like. So maybe introduce yourself, tell our listeners about where you're from, where you studied, and what kind of zigzag did you take to get to this particular role that you're in today?
For sure. My name is Moe Qureshi. I was born and raised in Ontario. Did my undergrad at the University of Toronto in chemistry and environmental science. Then I did my PhD in KAUST in Saudi Arabia, focused on chemical sciences, and I specialize in renewable energy. After that, I was a research scientist at Stanford in California. And when COVID hit, I decided to kind of change careers from a scientist to more of a policy analyst. The reason why I made that kind of change is because at the academic side, I was working with state-of-the-art technology, and it was amazing to witness how far technology has come. But in the real world, we're not using a lot of these technologies, and I saw that what's lagging is kind of our policy landscape, our regulatory landscape, which is still a bit stuck in the past. So I thought I'd bring some science into the legislative sphere and give advice to some decision makers and educate them on some of the modern science that's going on.
Amazing. Well,
And now here I am, Director of Climate Research and Policy at the Conservation Council of New Brunswick, and I'm focused on climate mitigation and adaptation, but a big focus is on mitigation right now, finding ways to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and try to clean up our energy and electricity sector.
amazing. Thank you. Um, so many questions just out of that, but I'll stick to our little grid here just to guide us. I think that one of the reasons that we created this podcast, Eco Factors, is to kind of bust myths and get through the fog of the stories that we have around renewable energy and alternatives,
Mhm.
because sometimes I find they're like a major block to progress. So we're going to get into, I guess, I think that you're a perfect person to answer a lot of these questions, and we'll kind of go down that path with this interview. Um, when you would have a lot of experience speaking with people about a transition, about renewables, about alternatives, and so when people hear energy transition in New Brunswick, what do you think they think it means? And how far off is that from reality?
That's a good place to start. I think in New Brunswick and maybe the rest of Canada as well. When we hear the term energy transition, I think the first thing that comes to people's mind is replacing fossil fuels with wind turbines, and there's just so much more to it than that. What I'm proposing, what many of us in the energy transition are proposing, is kind of like a system redesign. It's not just switching some project; it's redesigning our system. So it's not just about what we're generating, but also how we use energy, when we use it, and how the grid moves that energy around. So it includes energy efficiency, it includes electrification, it includes storage, imports, and smart meters and planning, not just renewables. So a lot of this transition isn't just about a technology swap. It's about making the system more reliable, affordable, and less polluting. It's about rethinking the foundation of our system. And why it's so critical is, with climate change causing um, ecological disasters all over the world with, increased flooding, increased droughts in some regions, natural disasters are increasing. So trying to reduce our greenhouse gases is of utmost importance to reduce some of these side effects that we're seeing from climate change. And the best way to do that is to clean up our grid. So Canada has made the commitment to get to a net zero economy, but you can't really, a lot of sectors aren't really able to decarbonize if the grid isn't decarbonized first, because that's one of our foundational layers of our infrastructure. So to me, starting there is the priority. And once we get that up and going, it'll be a lot easier to decarbonize the rest of our society.
Amazing. I like the more reliable, affordable, and resilient. In your view, what is what is our problem? Why are we seemingly so slow? Or would you say that, like, it's slow everywhere? Um, or kind of going sliding backwards everywhere? Or is it just that we're really old-fashioned in New Brunswick and we're kind of stuck in our ways? Or there's just not very many of us and we don't have the chance to, like, discuss
Yeah.
because there's more trees than people.
Well, to me, slow is relative. In the energy electricity space, things are typically on the 5, 10, 20-year cycle. So a lot of times people are looking for results within the year, and that's just not the pace that the energy and electricity sector moves at. It's more of a, you know, decade-long projects that all of these things have, or all of these projects have. So it does sometimes seem slow, but really these things can happen quite quickly. And when they do happen, it does shift the energy and electricity landscape quite quickly. So, in I guess when your question is, why is it so slow in New Brunswick? I think, you know, I don't really think it's slow. It's just there are so many portfolios moving at the same time. Like New Brunswick, we're adding a lot of wind onto the grid, but we're still adding fossil fuels onto the grid. There's plans to add more nuclear onto the grid. There's plans to fix the hydroelectric dam. Like there's so many varied projects, and even the coal reactor, they're considering changing it to a biomass reactor. So in my opinion, I think it's moving quite fast, but it's moving fast in almost every single direction,
Right.
and I'm not sure if that's the best way forward.
Hmm. Um, what kind of sectors do you think we're making the most progress in? Like,
Mm.
if we think renewables are more reliable, or if the resilience of a grid is more reliable by having many, many options, I suppose, and not one of those outweighing the other. Um, then, what is the most reliable model? I think you wrote at one point that, like, too
Mm.
often the same voices dominate. Um, I saw this on your blog. Too often the same
Mhm.
voices dominate, the same options are repeated, and transformative solutions are sidelined. Um, you know, so if one of the voices is louder, can that voice come to the table with all the other options and make a more resilient grid, rather than one outweighing the rest? What does the resilient grid look like?
Got good question. So, what I meant by that sentence is kind of we often default to a narrow set of familiar solutions that we've already tried in the past. So these are large, centralized projects that tend to dominate our energy system. So the economies of scale was always the default solution, and still is kind of today, about how we address our energy needs. It seemingly seems cheaper to build one large reactor than many small ones. But we're seeing that that's not really the case anymore. If you, instead of looking at just capital expenditure of a project, but a project over its lifetime, and considering the resilience of the system and considering sustainability of the system as well, that a lot of models and scientists and planners system planners now are starting to realize that distributed energy resources, sometimes we refer to this as DERs, that distributed energy resources have a lot more benefits than singular large centralized projects. So, for example, if you have like Point Lepreau as an example, it's the biggest it's the nuclear facility here in New Brunswick. It goes down once in a while for either planned or unplanned maintenance, and having such a large reactor go down generates an immense cost to ratepayers. And it's not just Lepro, right? It's Mactaquac is going to be refurbished, and converting Beldoon from coal to biomass. You have these singular major projects going through transformative change, but they're not as cheap as what was when they were originally built. When they were originally built, it was under the assumption that these projects would never break down. But when it comes to energy system planning, the costs that incur debt isn't necessarily the plan that you're making, but when things don't go as planned, when things break down, that's when the system gets really burdened and ratepayers feel the biggest impact, because then you have to import from somewhere else at a premium. You have to fix your generating station. What DERs or distributed energy resources offer is many more generating stations, but at a smaller level. So instead of one 600 megawatt reactor going down, if you had two 5 megawatt turbines that went down, that has a lot less implications on the system and a lot less cost to the system than a 600 megawatt reactor going down. So really, if we want to see this energy transition take off and see what's best for New Brunswick, we need to really rethink our system and rebuild our infrastructure to be more distributed. And New Brunswick is already, I mean, we have a huge rural population, and it takes a lot of effort to generate and transmit energy to those rural locations. We can start seeing systems now that those rural locations might be able to build and generate their own electricity and then connect to the transmission system to either sell back or import depending on their need at a much more reliable and affordable way than our current system. And we're seeing this with the indigenous models now. We're seeing a lot of collaboration with indigenous communities who are getting equity stake into some of these projects, and they're finally able to affordably, reliably, and sustainably supply their own communities. So we see that the system works, but it's now time to implement it at a much larger scale.
I'm thinking while you're speaking that recently, in discussions through the media about the 400 to 500 megawatt gas plant that is proposed for the land bridge between Nova Scotia and New Brunswick, they the kind of people that are in favor of this have said or criticized the opposition to it in saying that we're not discussing the alternatives. We're just saying that we don't want it, not in my backyard, or don't build anything anywhere. And in fact, I don't think that's been the case. In fact, you've spoken at a bunch of our community information sessions, where we've actually been viably trying to provide the government or provide the public and whomever wants to come, to see what the alternatives are and that there are real alternatives. Could those alternatives completely replace a third of New Brunswick's power? Um, and what exactly would that look like?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the wind and solar potential in New Brunswick is quite immense. People don't think New Brunswick has a lot of solar potential, but I believe St. John is within the top 10 or top 15 cities in Canada with solar potential. There's so much wind potential, but it also as I said, it's not just about the technology, it's about the grid itself. We need to start connecting our grid east to west, not just north to south, so that we can move this distributed energy around. We need to start putting in some batteries, just like Ontario is doing. They're building, almost now trying to procure almost 3,000 megawatts of batteries because they're starting to see the benefits of that on the system, where you can do peak shaving, reduce costs, and lower emissions all at the same time. I think I think when I look at New Brunswick's system, is that there's you can build the wind turbines, you can build solar on rooftops, you can couple it with battery packs. I mean, look at Shediac, for example. In Shediac, they were able to build some large solar arrays onto the government buildings and connect that to all the residential homes around, and each residential home was fit in with a battery pack. When Hurricane Fiona hit, all of New Brunswick went offline except for Shediac. So all these questions of reliability of renewables, I think, is coming to an end. Renewables are now becoming more reliable than our previous technologies like fossil fuels. We're able to store extra electricity and at peak hours use our battery packs instead of burning some more fossil fuels. Um, I think um, I think New Brunswick really has the potential to get above 90 to almost 100% on renewables. And if they want, keep a little bit of gas backup of what they already have. No need to build anything new.
That's really exciting.
Oh, sorry, and I forgot one major point, that something that I think is constantly overlooked as well is demand side management, reducing our demand in smart, clever ways. Time of use is the frequent example that's given. Like in Ontario, I'm from Ontario, they have different prices depending on the time of day. So if it's at peak time, let's say 9 a.m., it's probably the most expensive rate you can have because everyone's waking up, everyone's turning on their appliances and whatnot, making their coffee. That rate is quite expensive. And Ontario needs to have all their generation kind of on at that point to meet that demand. But now that they're getting 3,000 megawatt battery packs slowly installed, they can start using their reserves at that peak instead of generating more. And even so, um, when you think about New Brunswick doesn't have time of day use, right? Oh, sorry, I forgot to complete. In Ontario, at night, at like 9 or 10 p.m., the rates are a lot cheaper. So if you just do your laundry at 9 p.m., it'll be a fraction of the cost if you did it at 9 a.m. So New Brunswick does have two peaks, one at around 8 to 10 a.m. and another at 4 to 6 p.m., where everyone is using electricity. But, you could shift some of that through behavioral changes by changing time of day use rates. So NB Power's installed smart meters everywhere, but we're not really using them or taking advantage of this modern technology.
Yeah, I saw, in the media this morning that there was, Nova Scotia was talking about how it got power from New Brunswick over the coldest last few days that we've had, because New Brunswick had so much power that they were able to give it to their friends in PEI and Nova Scotia. And in Nova Scotia, they actually, let everybody know that on January 24th, I think it was, that it was gonna be really cold, and they asked people to kind of curb their usage during those peak times and give them a list of
Mm.
things that they could do, um, which I thought was really nice because I don't know the last time that I've heard from NB Power to talk to us about peak times or usage. I know that the numbers for how much energy is being used at any given time is on the NB Power website. But I don't think that most people are going there. And energy literacy is an issue, and the CBC has a new kind of podcast about that, which is really interesting, or show, I should say, about it. And I think it's really important. It's part of what the job I used to do actually in Australia was go to people's houses and teach them how to read their power bill and then how to save energy using their appliances in different ways and how to use your house as a sustainability tool. But I'd love to see more of that communication come
Mm.
from our utility and
For
creativity
sure.
as a solution. How,
I
so
think we do need better communications between utility and ratepayers. It's just whenever I get emails from NB Power, it's about either it's my bill going up, or sorry, either it's my bill or they're going to tell me that rates are going up, so my bills are going to start increasing. But I don't get other emails that, we're having a storm coming. Please consider reducing how much energy you use, and it'll take some strain off the system. So Nova Scotia did that, and good on them for doing that. And I bet most people complied, and Nova Scotia was able to reduce the demand that day and meet their needs. So certainly communication needs to be improved,
Yeah.
and I think it will be eventually. I hope.
And then I think communication in both ways too, they could tell us what they need and then we could tell them, like, if there was a major opposition to the gas plant that really doesn't want it to go in, maybe they would listen to us just like we listen to them if that communication was open and we could find a creative solution. One of the things that you said when I first heard you speak, and that stuck with me, and I've actually stolen it and used it many times since, is and I think because it's like an epiphany, you're like, whoa, like when NV Power decided that they needed more energy for 2028, they they didn't say, here's our problem. Who's got the best solution? The best solution being best for ratepayers to keep the rates down, best for the environment to maintain sustainability and, show leadership across Canada and to help Canada get down to its net zero goals and New Brunswick's net zero 2035. And best for, say, the residents of anywhere where they might have effects happen to them, negative effects of some kind of development. And possibly best for their relationship with their ratepayers. They just said, "Who's got the gas turbines?" In the most layman's terms way possible. Can you talk a bit about that
Sure.
expression of interest procedure?
Sure. So, how I see it is NB Power works very much internally. They have their integrated resource plan, which they're mandated by the Electricity Act to release every 3 years. So, every 3 years, they release this integrated resource plan. And essentially, what this document tells you is what their plans and operations are for the next 3 years, but planning for the next 20 years. As I said, when you talked about time at the beginning, the time scale of the energy electricity system is within the decade range, not really within the year range. But they plan every 3 years. They look at what happened through their system, what they're going to need, and how they're going to operate through that. But New Brunswick is one of the few provinces where their integrated resource plan does not go through the regulator. It's all done internal. So, for example, Nova Scotia, I believe their integrated resource plan goes through the regulator, and then people can intervene, comment on their plan, suggest changes. But essentially, all this external knowledge comes to Nova Scotia Power. Whereas in New Brunswick, it's not the same thing. Like New NB Power, they did reach out to me and many other stakeholders in New Brunswick to comment on what should be included in their 2026 integrated resource plan, and I provided my comments and many others as well. But it doesn't go through the regulatory system, and it's not subject to scrutiny, just like all the other most other utilities go through. So it's very much internal planning, and this kind of internal planning, I think in the long term, is creating a bit of an echo chamber within NB Power, where they did things this way, and you hear about this over every year, and you have very little external data coming in, so you get locked into what you've been doing before as the only solution for the future, right? So it's very difficult to break into this internal bubble. So when after several years of that, when it comes to procuring new generation like this Riggs gas diesel turbine that they're proposing here, the problem here is that they've they have their plan, and they found their specific solutions to address their needs, but it's their internal solutions. And maybe it's biased, maybe it's not, but regardless, if the more external data, the more heads that are thinking about this, they they could provide opinions that NB Power hasn't considered before that could improve the system. So when it comes to the request of expression of interest, they did request specifically that we need a gas turbine, and they found people to build that. When I think the best option is to say that we have a capacity shortfall. Who can address this capacity shortfall? Instead of identifying the solution their internal solution and finding stuff that fits their specific way, I think it would be better to open it up that this is our general problem. We think these are the best solutions, but let's put it to the test. Let's test those solutions versus other people bringing in solutions and seeing which one is truly the most affordable to ratepayers, which one is the most resilient, which one is the most sustainable, right? Instead of predetermining the outcome, let's reconsider, let's take the problem as a whole and let people comment on how to address that issue. So they should have did a request and saying that we have this capacity shortfall. Who can address it and how do they plan to address it?
Mhm.
And I think you would have seen so many more bids from so many more companies. Maybe there's a Canadian company who could have addressed the solution.
Mhm.
Maybe there's a more affordable company who can address the solution. And but at this point, we don't actually know because the outcome was, I think, already predetermined that this is the exact technology and company that we want to work with. Their integrated resource plan, they they have several different models. They look at renewables. They look at almost every type of technology, but it's always done in silos. So the issue that NB Power has with renewables is that they're worried they're going to have to overbuild renewables. And if you overbuild renewables, they're going to have to curtail half this energy, and that's not really cost effective. But that modeling never considers if we increased our transmission capability, if we were able to sell that to New England to recover some costs, right? So right now with this Riggs Tantramar plant, they're saying an extra 100 megawatts we can sell to Nova Scotia and recoup our debt. They could do the same thing with renewables, but that's never considered. It's always considered for fossil fuels, but never considered for renewable energy. And I think that's really lacking in NB Power's analysis and models and larger systems planning.
I'm glad you brought up money because everyone loves to talk about money, especially when we're like in the dead of winter, and we're stuck and we have to turn our heaters on and we want cozy tea time all the time. Or I'm just talking about me. um, so my question is, how much cheaper would batteries be?
Well, I think, well, once again, it's how you define the cost that I think is always interesting, right? At a capital expense, if you consider both projects, I would say they're relatively similar price.
You mean
But
gas?
if you
The
think
gas
of,
turbine
yeah,
versus
with the
the
gas
batteries?
plant versus a battery, but that's not the right way to compare these projects. You have to compare it over its lifetime, right? So when you think about the Tantramar gas plant, it's going to be, well, now considering a 500 megawatt plant, about 10 aeroderivative gas turbine jet engines that are going to burn this fuel combined with synchronous condensers, but over 25 years. And that's 25 years of volatile fuel prices that is on the back of ratepayers. That is, you know, um, that's a long time to be with little predictability of what fuel prices will be in the future. And batteries are different and cheaper in the sense that over 25 years, there's no fuel costs. You're not paying for gas, you're not paying for diesel. And on top of that, when you think of, I'll give you a number for how much cheaper it'll be in a second, but what is also interesting is that Riggs is proposed as also a reliability feature, right? We're going to build all this renewable energy onto the grid, and we need something to balance it as it comes in. Well, batteries can offer the same thing with the synchronous condensers. It can also offer a lot more. So if this Tantramar gas plant, it's they're saying that it's only going to be a peaker plant, although now they're going to sell a lot of it, 100 megawatts to Nova Scotia. So who knows how long that'll be on. But even if it's a peaker plant, that means most of the year it's not. It's not as useful as it could be. Whereas a battery, you could use every single day to shave off peaks and recharge it at night. Like those benefits are can be applied throughout the full 25 years every single day. You can see those kinds of benefits. So in terms of actual cost, I believe that this Tantramar gas plant could be will cost ratepayers certainly over 25 years in the billions of dollars. Definitely over a billion, probably closer to $10 billion in its lifetime of costs burden onto ratepayers, whereas a battery can be probably close to a billion. And what's shocking is that NB Power has reversed those numbers, right? NB Power is claiming that batteries are going to cost $10 billion and this gas plant's only going to cost a billion, but they don't include the fuel charge, they don't include the operations and maintenance, and they're using outdated figures on what current costs of batteries are. Batteries have gotten so much cheaper over the last few years. So I think a battery project could end up being between $6 to $10 billion cheaper than this gas plant over 25 years, considering all the other additional benefits that it's giving to New Brunswickers. So I think just financially and that batteries would be the more responsible choice for ratepayers. It'll be cheaper for them.
So, on that note, kind of wondering behind the scenes, what kind of government policies are in place or not in place that are affecting our ability to make good, sustainable decisions as a democratic society with a liberal government that we would think would be pretty progressive and also opportunistic. I think batteries, the cost keeps going down for technologies in the renewable sector. And I want to jump at that. I want to put solar panels on my house. They're just about to like blow up as far as I can see. I'm like, then now's the
Mhm.
time to use the power from the sun. And I know that Conservation Council has been working on some policy stuff. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure, absolutely. Um, w- we are proposing a ton of changes to the current regulatory framework here in New Brunswick. We want to see an updated Electricity Act, an updated Energy and Utility Board Act. So, for example, with an updated Electricity Act, we'd like to see the option for more community energy projects. We'd like to see the option, like just like the Indigenous model is working, can that model be replicated within cities? You know, St. John Energy is finding a way to lower rates at a time when NB Power is increasing rates. How are they doing that? How can we learn from that and take advantage of that? Um, and also just encouraging more distributed energy onto the grid so that way we can finally modernize our system. Um, in terms of the Energy and Utility Board Act, right now, as an intervener, I find it very difficult to bring data forward, and it's quite a narrow scope, narrow mandate that the utility board has. They're very much an economic regulator, and although that sounds nice, it doesn't seem to be working in practice because the rates are going up exponentially fast. So, I mean, we've almost had a 30% rate increase over the last 3 years, right? It's not the economic regulator is not working as intended. And so one of the suggestions we're making is broaden the mandate. So both of our neighbors, Nova Scotia and Quebec, they both now have a sustainability mandate or a net zero mandate, a mandate that now forces the regulator to consider more than just economics and which allows more data, more knowledge, more information to come to the regulator so that they can make a better decision and a better long-term decision. So we're suggesting some changes just to change our legislative framework in a way that allows for us to modernize because we're very much stuck in the past and we need to break free from this if ratepayers want to see some relief.
Okay, great. And that kind of answers my next question too. If we were having this conversation in 5 years, um, what kind of successes would we be discussing? I do like to dream first and work backwards. That's how I do things, and that's how I maintain hope in this field. Even though sometimes it feels like we're up against a lot. Um, so a successful kind of next 5 years would look like, what's your top three?
What's my top three? Well, I would like to see renewables outpace any other generation, and I think we're starting to get there. So the federal government has, I think, invested close to $1 billion in New Brunswick to build new wind. A lot of it with Indigenous collaborations. I think it's going to be over 600 megawatts of wind, so that's very much exciting. I would like to see storage take off. honestly, what I'd like to see is us we taking advantage of renewable energy first. To me, that should be the priority. So you have all these different forms of energy, right? You have some that are extractive and burning, like nuclear and fossil fuels. Those are very much extractive. And of course, batteries you need to extract, but you extract once to build that battery, and that'll last over 20 years. So things like solar energy, where you constantly have the sun, where you have wind energy, you constantly have the wind. Of course, there's days that aren't windy, but that's why you have battery backup to protect against those days. The priority should be those renewable options first because they're abundant. And that abundance is how you address affordability. The reason why we're struggling with our energy system is we're using the non-abundant resources, and that's expensive. If we want to address the root issue of affordability, we need to go for the most abundant resources first. That is solar, that is wind. It's abundant all over New Brunswick. Take advantage of that first. If you have too much of it, store it in the battery and shave off your peaks. So start building a system that takes advantage of our cheapest resources first. And by cheapest, I mean free. Wind and solar are there for us to take advantage of. And then you start going down that list. If wind and solar really aren't there, then start going into some of those extractive technologies, right? Like, for example, converting the Beldoon from a coal reactor to a biomass reactor. What's the point in that? You're just burning one for burning another, right? If you have to burn something to generate energy, it's not really sustainable, right? And regardless, biomass is so much less dense than coal, so you're going to have to burn way more wood. And so we're already having issues of logging in New Brunswick, and now there's proposals to log even more. And so, how much the forests is very special. The forests hold a special place in New Brunswick because ever since I've been in here, people are very proud of our forests. That's at risk if we try to burn things at that kind of scale. So, over the next 5 years, I'd like us to create an energy system that takes advantage of our most freest, cheapest resources first. And then when those aren't enough, you start worrying about everything else. But we need to really build out our wind. We need to really build out our solar and our storage. And I assure you that after a few years, that's when you're going to see prices drop and you're going to start addressing this affordability crisis. And it just so happens to be that affordable option is the most sustainable option too. So I think it's just a win-win-win for everybody.
Well, I look forward to that world and living in that world, and,
It'll come.
yeah, I'm honored also to share this space with you, and to be fighting the same fight as you, and yeah, and to be living through this exciting time, where I think that anything is possible and we're getting smarter, I hope.
Mhm.
Um On that note, my last 3 questions, are simple and easy. My first one is, what are you reading right now?
What am I reading? Right now, I'm reading Project Hail Mary, a fiction book. Very, very good. It's about this teacher who goes up into space to try to resolve why the sun is dying, and it's a really good read.
Oh,
I recommend it. Project Hail Mary.
along the lines of solar. So they go up and have a conversation
Yeah,
about
yeah,
how
exactly.
important it is
So
that they stay
I
there.
like reading fiction. My work life is full of nonfiction, so
Yeah,
my
nice.
personal life, I prefer fiction.
What song do you have on repeat recently?
Oh, I would say "Grateful" by Coda the Friend. It makes me feel very grateful about my life and puts me in a good mood always.
Interesting. I've been
Yeah.
listening to Grateful by Saint Finnegan.
Oh, I don't know that one. Well, I'll listen to yours. You listen to mine.
Yeah,
Let
yeah,
me know what
yeah.
you think.
And if you could interview anyone in the world, who would it be, and what would you ask them?
Oh my God. If I can interview anyone in the world, oh, geez. Honestly, maybe I'm a chemist and I love cooking. So I might consider Marco Pierre White, who I think is one of the best chefs in the world, and I'd like to pick his brain. So I'm a big chef. I love cooking. My wife loves cooking, and to me, that's the cheapest way of traveling. And I'd love to interview him and get to know him a bit better.
Nice. Thank you so much for your time today, Mo.
No problem.